This was never meant to be art.
Welcome back to Neural Nonsense Creativity Circuit. Our journey through the Empire's top 5 emerging art forms has already taken us through synesthetic gardens, gravitational calligraphy, and psychic origami, each stranger than the last. We're now approaching number 2 on the list, cradle needling. But before we get there, we need to take one more necessary diversion to explain what a cradle actually is.
This entry has been flagged for contextual integrity. The following discussion references a cradle. Cradles are not artistic constructs. They are not cultural artifacts. They are foundational systems. Proceeding without orientation has resulted in historical compression, narrative discontinuity, and several regrettable incidents. Orientation is advised.
For those of you tuning in from an alternate spacetime, a collapsed timeline, or simply joining us out of order, a cradle is the device that sustains our empire. At its most basic, a cradle allows us to cross distances that should take lifetimes. It connects the furthest reaches of known space. It makes empire possible.
More precisely, a cradle generates a localized spacetime bubble. Within that bubble, distance collapses into a navigable lattice. Travel occurs instantaneously from the outside observer's perspective.
Which is the technical way of saying it gets you there before history notices you've left. This matters because the next art form, cradle needling, interferes directly with this system. What's often omitted from recruitment materials is that the Empire did not invent cradles.
No, they were discovered. Ancient devices left behind by an unknown predecessor civilization.
We are, as a culture, remarkably consistent in this regard. We find miraculous machines, dismantle them, reassemble them badly, and call the result progress.
Reverse engineering is not badly.
It is when you don't know what the original purpose was.
Cradles require extraordinary energy to operate. They draw from subspace flux, often interacting with planetary magnetic fields, cores, and atmospheres. Cradle placement determines trade routes, migration patterns, and political relevance. Cradle proximity also alters settlement behavior over time. Populations cluster, specialize, and adapt around stable routes. Entire professions exist only because a cradle was placed nearby.
And entire cultures fade when one isn't.
Placement is not permanent. Cradles can be dismantled, relocated, and reassembled elsewhere. The Empire treats them as anchors, set when stability is required, lifted when priorities shift.
Which is why some worlds flourish around them, and others slowly unravel. In other words, the Empire doesn't rule by force alone. It rules by deciding who gets connected and who must wait. Before we go any further, Etherstein, I suspect you're about to clear your throat and inevitably point out a problem.
Several, yes. The imperial theory, and I stress theory, holds that a cradle creates a bounded space-time bubble. Inside it, distance collapses. Outside observers perceive no duration. Causality is meant to remain intact. That is what is taught. It is also what fails under scrutiny. Because it should not work. A bubble of that scale should collapse immediately, shear apart, decohere, or vanish into subspace.
And yet it doesn't.
No. Worse, the bubble is not sealed. Cradle fields interact with gravity, radiation, neural input, planetary magnetospheres. By conventional physics, they are impossible. Unless the bubble isn't fully contained.
You mean it leaks?
Or that it is anchored elsewhere. Which brings us, inevitably, to subspace. If the bubble is partially embedded there, then size becomes deceptive. What appears vast in real space may be compact along another axis. That would explain how it exists. It would also explain why time occasionally behaves as though it were negotiable.
Which is where the rumors begin. Pilots arriving slightly out of sequence, memories that don't quite line up, dreams of places not yet visited, and these stories surface most often around Madane.
There is no verified evidence of time travel. There is, however, increasing evidence that prolonged exposure to unstable cradle fields can misalign perception, memory, and subjective ordering.
So not time travel.
No, more like time pooling, localized, temporary. Enough to confuse a traveler without rewriting history. I dislike this conclusion.
And yet some people swear they remember Madane before they ever set foot on it. Madane occupies a magnetically volatile orbit, threaded with old subspace scars. As its orbital completion approaches, cradle activity around it has increased. Some believe this makes it a crossroads, others suspect it makes it receptive.
If that is true, and I am not conceding that it is, then the problem is not that cradles allow time travel. The problem is that they were never designed to keep time separate in the first place.
Which brings us eventually to a question people tend to postpone for as long as they can. Not because it's complicated, but because it's uncomfortable. If cradles are machines after all, why does the Empire rely so completely on mystics to fly its ships through them? Why not automation? Why not a button?
Because while cradles can be calculated, predicted, and initiated mechanically, they cannot be navigated that way. The resonance fields involved can be mapped in advance. Entry conditions can be prepared. But once a vessel enters the jump envelope, automated systems lose coherence. The space does not remain consistent enough to be managed by algorithms alone.
So, the machine opens the door, but someone still has to walk through it.
Precisely. Mystics are the ones who remain conscious inside the jump. They feel fluctuations before instruments register them. They adjust course while equations are still catching up. Without a mystic, a ship may activate a cradle, but it will not survive the passage.
In simpler terms, the universe behaves better when someone is paying attention.
If you insist on phrasing it that way?
Which raises an uncomfortable question. Where do mystics come from?
Officially, they are identified, trained, and assigned through imperial channels.
Officially. Unofficially, there are rumors. Persistent ones. Of a world where mystics are not merely trained, but raised. A place removed from standard transit routes. No confirmed coordinates, no public records. Some believe it exists slightly out of phase, displaced in time, or folded into subspace. Accessible only through cradles, tuned in ways the Empire does not discuss.
There is no verified evidence of such a planet.
No, but there is a notable absence of evidence to the contrary. Mystics appear in service fully formed. Their early years are difficult to audit.
If such a location existed, it would explain several anomalies. Shared neural traits, unusual temporal tolerance, an ability to remain coherent longer than baseline humans inside unstable spacetime conditions.
And why some of them speak of places they remember, but cannot return to?
That remains speculation.
Of course, but speculation has a habit of becoming infrastructure in this empire. It's worth noting, of course, that not all mystics are created equal.
Most of them are not mystics in any meaningful sense. I'm serious. The Empire has a regrettably broad definition of the term. There are licensed pilots. There are ritual specialists. There are so-called journey guides who claim to sense probability currents while rattling bones at a navigation console.
You're saying there are tiers?
There are levels of training, yes. And then there are people who learned 3 gestures, memorized a chant, and decided that qualified them to negotiate with reality.
Careful! You're being unkind to people who have, on occasion, been extremely useful.
Define useful.
You remember Weird Space? After the Dream AI stitched it together and we couldn't tell up from down, or cause from effect, or which way out was supposed to be reassuring.
I remember being deeply unimpressed.
And yet, when we were quite literally stuck between elements, unable to bind the first sequence properly, someone knew how to steady it.
Yes. I concede the point. But the ones like, you know who, the real ones, are rare, closely monitored, and tend not to advertise. Which I suppose is why when one of them interferes with a cradle-adjacent system, it is not folk magic misbehaving. It is expertise choosing to be irresponsible. So
when we talk about cradles, we're talking about the skeleton of the Empire, the hidden system that decides which stories continue smoothly and which are interrupted.
And that is precisely why what comes next is troubling.
Because the next art form in our list of emerging art forms in the Empire is called cradle needling, and spoiler alert, Etherstein fainted twice while we were recording that episode.
Technically, it is not the cradle being needled, it is the bubble surrounding it, which is worse. Oh no, it's happening again.
Assessment complete. Despite stylistic irregularities, this entry remains structurally sound. Archival approval granted.